didn't notice the poster at first. I noticed the glue, the sweet chemical rot of it, breathing out of the tiled tunnel that leads to Metro Insurgents. The night was damp enough to bead on the tiles like a second skin, and every breath I took tasted faintly of dust and old paper. Only when the breeze lifted a torn corner did the face appear. A photocopied oval, pallid and grainy, framed by hair that fell like bleached rope. Underneath, in Spanish and English, "Have you seen this man? Do not make contact. He is not real." I stared longer than I should have. The halogen lights hummed and the people moving past had that blurred underwater quality you get in any city after midnight, when everyone is awake for a reason they won't say out loud. The poster was badly printed, the kind of thing a student throws together at a copy shop, and yet the eyes, if that smudge could be called eyes, pulled at me. I was already late, apron balled in my bag, oil still on my fingers. I told myself it was nothing, a prank. Zona Rosa is full of pranks, full of experiments. Artists here believe that the street is a stage and the city will clap if you make them afraid, but the wording wouldn't let go. Do not make contact. He is not real. Warnings don't talk like that. Street warnings love detail, purse snatchers, a new scam, a man with a scar near the Diana fountain. He is not real isn't a warning. It's a confession or an invitation. Once you say something isn't real, it lives in the exact place inside your head where the real things hide when you don't want to see them. I walked on, pretending I hadn't slowed down. The tunnel opened into a knot of kiosks, plastic saints glowing from glass boxes, candy skull stickers collecting grit, a candle guttering so low it smoked the plexiglass with a brown halo. People sell protection in this city the way other places sell umbrellas. A pocket rosary, a prayer card, a tiny plastic bottle that claims it holds holy water. I grew up Catholic enough to know the weight of a sign of the cross, to feel the difference between a prayer mumbled at breakfast and a prayer swallowed on a street where the air itself feels watched. Above ground, Reforma blinked with sleek glass ambition. Behind the shine, the neighborhood exhaled its other breath. The alleys where the music thins to a tremor, where the laugh you hear is sometimes your own echo. If you've worked nights here, you draw a private map, the kind that doesn't appear in any tourist brochure. Streets where the pavement is honest and streets where it isn't. After 2 years bussing tables and staying late to scrub fryers, I knew my map. I knew which doorway sex workers used to avoid the police, which corner the boys with the spray cans claimed, which block smelled of hot trash and weed, and which one carried the steady perfume of detergent from a laundromat that never sleeps. I knew where not to look. I knew how to look anyway. A thing happens when rumor rubs up against ritual. The rumor was the poster. The ritual was the way the city already taught us to walk. Keys protruding between fingers, headphones in but not playing, a sacred pause before each blind corner. When those meet, something opens. I don't mean a portal exactly, though people here will tell you that certain places keep their own doorways, but a seam. The seam is tiny and stubborn, like frayed thread at the cuff of your shirt, and your fingers can't stop worrying at it. I was already worrying. The face on the paper had measured itself against the face I sometimes catch in the restaurant window after closing. My own, ghosted by grease and fluorescent light. There's a superstition that says if you stick enough copies of a face in public, the city will grow a body to wear it. We feed the city names and images, and it feeds us back an echo slightly wrong. I don't know where I heard that. Maybe I invented it to excuse the feeling that I had just spoken to something by reading it. The walk from Insurgentes to the little side street where I work is short if you keep your head down. That night I didn't. Every reflective surface kept wanting to show me a sliver of white hair just at the edge of the frame. I looked anyway, and it was always a strip light or the pale belly of a shirt on a mannequin. I don't scare easily. That's what the city does best, teach you how not to. But fear isn't only adrenaline and sprinting. Sometimes fear is a texture that wraps you without squeezing, a film you can't wash off. The kitchen door stuck as usual, and the radio was tuned to a station that can't decide if it loves pop or old hymns. Between songs, the announcer misfired a clip of a choir, 2 measures of a Gloria sudden and bright, then chopped back to a commercial for beer. Grease popped. Silver trays chimed against tile. The night manager asked why my face looked like I'd swallowed ice. I lied because we all lie about the little things we carry in from the street. If we unpacked them out loud, we'd never get anything done. Still, I took a minute, standing by the walk-in fridge with its smell of wet cardboard and lemon cleanser, to picture the tunnel again. There's a type of faith that isn't belief. It's attention. If you attend long enough, even to a banal thing, it starts to lay claim. I've seen this with tourists and with drunks and with people who fall in love too hard. The object grows teeth. The church has a word for the way bread becomes not bread. Maybe rumor can do that to a man who doesn't exist. Maybe that's the trick. If enough of us agree not to look him in the eyes, his eyes will bloom. On break, I stepped out to smoke even though I shouldn't. The alley smelled of damp and metal. Above the rim of the roof across from me, a sliver of moon hung like a fingernail clip, small and indifferent. Somewhere a bottle shattered. Somewhere a woman laughed in Spanish with the roundness you only hear after midnight. The vowels stretched like satin. I checked my phone, not for messages, but for a photo of my mother's kitchen. An old habit when the city grows too tall. And found myself scrolling back instead to the camera I'd opened at the tunnel, meaning to take a picture and then choosing not to. The last image was a blurred smear of white and black. The torn corner must have fluttered just as I lifted the phone. That blur looked like hair in a draft. It looked like a face turning away. If I had taken the photo, I might have sent it to someone, might have written, "Look what they're posting now, he's back." He? How quickly I had given it a pronoun. No, that's not true. I think he arrived with one. The city knows how to gender its shadows. I finished the cigarette, pinched the cherry out, and promised myself I'd sleep early after closing. In the promise, I heard the small, hollow laugh that means I'm already lying. The poster had adjusted the angle of the night by a degree or two, and that is enough always to change the destination entirely. I'll say this now so you understand me later. I didn't go looking for him. I didn't. I kept my map in my head and my eyes on my feet. But the thing about a seam is that it catches. It catches on doorways and on whispers and on the corner of a red jacket passing in your peripheral vision, and then it's hooked. And then you're walking differently without knowing why. By the time I locked up, the alley had cooled and tightened. I said goodnight to the dishwasher, who wears a crucifix under his shirt and kisses it every time he leaves. I don't kiss mine, I don't wear one. I ran my thumb across my palm as I walked, as if polishing an invisible coin. The poster's words drummed under the street noise. Do not make contact. He is not real. The truth is, I believe both lines at the same time. I believe the command and the denial. I believed them enough that when someone later asked if I'd seen the man in the poster, my mouth answered before my memory could, no. And also, yes, I have spent most of my adult life in kitchens, the kind that never let you hear your own thoughts because of the clatter of pans and the hiss of oil. In Juarez, our restaurant is wedged between a pawn shop that never seems to close and a nightclub whose neon crosses pulse like a heartbeat until dawn. Tourists come here for wings, for beer, for the illusion that every night in Zona Rosa is a celebration. For us who work, the celebration is endless labor. I can tell time not by a clock but by the smell. At 6 it is lemon cleaner, at 8 it is frying fat, and past 10 the smell of sweat and cologne starts to seep in as the night crowd thickens. I used to think I knew the streets outside better than the menu. After closing, I would step into the night with my apron still wet, cut through alleyways to save a few minutes, or linger near the clubs where music shook the ground as if the city had its own pulse. Zona Rosa is a strange organ beating with a different rhythm every 2 blocks. One street is glitter and drag queens dancing under rainbow flags. The next is shadows where the drugged out whisper to each other, their eyes lit by nothing human. You learn quickly which to cross and which to avoid. That was my private map, a cartography drawn with footsteps and small fears. Anthropologists call it a geography of fear. But for us, it's survival. Every server, every bartender, every bouncer has one. You memorize not just places, but also hours. This corner safe until midnight, that alley forbidden after 2. Even the dogs know, barking at some shadows and not at others. There's an odd ritual to moving through those streets. We never wrote it down, but we all follow it. Keys clenched between fingers like claws. Phone in hand, pretending to text but camera ready. A half smile to strangers so you don't look afraid. In Mexico City, fear is not the absence of control, it's a performance you perfect. Still, some nights remind you that no performance is enough. I remember one night before all this when the radio inside played a hymn by mistake. It was only 2 bars of a Gloria slipped between reggaeton and a beer commercial. But it felt like the city inhaled sharply. Outside, a sudden drip from the air conditioner tapped the window like a knuckle. No one noticed, no one but me. My grandmother would have said it was a sign that sometimes angels speak not with voices but with interruptions, with a noise that doesn't belong. She used to tell me that if a hymn plays by accident, it means the dead have wandered too close. I laughed it off the way you laugh off most superstitions when you're young and trying to be hard. But I didn't laugh long. When I stepped outside to toss garbage, the alley behind the restaurant had turned into a corridor of echoes. My footsteps came back twice, not once. And in the shine of a puddle, I saw myself carrying the bag, only the reflection's head wasn't mine. It was tipped low, hair trailing white against the wet concrete. When I blinked, the water only showed trash and sky. These things you keep quiet. If you tell them, your friends roll their eyes, or worse, they nod too quickly as if they've seen the same. Silence is safer, so you bury it under trays of wings and jokes about customers. My ex-girlfriend knew the silence too. She worked 2 streets from me in a cafe where the walls were painted pastel, pretending to belong to Paris instead of Mexico City. After we broke up, she avoided me like a curse. Our shifts ended nearly the same time, but she always chose different exits, different trains, just to keep distance. That night, though, she was waiting. Standing outside my restaurant like she used to when we were still together, but her shoulders weren't relaxed and her smile was pulled too thin. I knew before she spoke that something was wrong. She hated asking me for anything, hated giving me the chance to think she still needed me. Yet she looked me in the eye and asked if I would walk her to the metro. "To Insurgentes," she said, and her voice shook even though she tried to cover it with a shrug. It wasn't just her. A co-worker joined us, one who usually laughed at fear. That night, she didn't want to walk alone either. The 3 of us made an odd procession, pretending small talk while our eyes scanned every corner. She told us then what had happened, the man. At first I thought it was nothing. Zona Rosa is full of strange men, drunks, tourists, men who mistake their madness for style. A tall foreigner, pale, with long white hair, a little hat, a red coat. It could be a character from a cabaret, a leftover from a parade. But then she described the way he looked back at her, the way he ran ahead, only to crouch low at the corner, his face appearing near the ground, not where a face should be. She said it so quietly I almost missed it. He crawled like he wasn't made for standing, like he wanted me to see him that way. My skin prickled. She wasn't a woman who scared easy, neither was I. But the map I carried in my head suddenly felt incomplete, as if a street had shifted under my feet. We walked faster toward Insurgentes, lights ahead flickering in green and yellow. The metro's entrance gaped like a throat ready to swallow us safe. Yet with every step I felt as if something moved just out of sight, pacing us. The city has many eyes, but that night it felt like only one watched, patient, white-haired, waiting for us to turn. And the truth, I think we all knew then, the poster was not a prank, it was a warning. She tried to tell it like a story, my ex, but her voice kept faltering. You could see in her face she wanted us to think she was exaggerating, that it was just some drunk in a costume. But her hands betrayed her. They were trembling, hidden in her coat pockets, and every few seconds she pressed her lips together like she was swallowing something sour. He wasn't just tall, she said. He was too tall, taller than any man I've seen on these streets, maybe 1.85 m, maybe more. His shoulders were thin, but he moved fast, too fast for his age. His hair, it wasn't blonde, it was white, so white it almost glowed under the lamps. It hung all the way down his back. Her words brushed against an old memory in me. In some pueblos, people talk about the Nahual, the shapeshifter. Sometimes it's an animal. Sometimes it wears a human skin that doesn't fit quite right. They say you can tell by the way it moves, because it never moves entirely like us. I never believed those stories, but hearing her describe the man's hair, the crooked way he craned his neck, I felt the same unease I once felt when my grandmother whispered those tales by candlelight. She kept talking. He wore a little hat, like a parody of a hat, barely sitting on his head, and a red jacket, bright as blood even in the dark. At first I thought maybe he was just eccentric. He looked back at me and I almost laughed. Men do that sometimes just to show they're not sneaking up on you, but then... Here she stopped. We were walking down a lit avenue now, but it wasn't enough. Her eyes were still locked on some memory corner darker than where we stood. Then I saw him again at the next corner. He leaned out. She demonstrated with her own body, crouching low as we walked, tilting her head. Not from standing height. From down near the ground, like he was crawling. His face just appeared, sideways, quick, then gone. I thought I imagined it, but no, I knew I hadn't. He wanted me to see him that way. She squeezed the pepper spray in her purse until it clicked. Safety off. Her breath quickened just telling it. I've studied fear in myself, the way it works, the way the city teaches you to control it. Usually fear is of what men can do, robbery, assault, the kind of violence we breathe like exhaust. But her fear wasn't that. It was the fear of something wrong in the body itself. The way a limb moves where it shouldn't. The uncanny valley, psychologists call it. When something looks human but moves against the rules of being human. Our other companion, the co-worker, finally admitted she too had heard rumors. A man crawling backward down Avenida Chapultepec. A man whose laughter sounded like it came from under the ground instead of his chest. We all fell silent then. And for the first time since I'd started working in Juarez, I didn't trust the rhythm of my own map. The metro entrance loomed ahead, crowded even this late. My ex's steps grew quicker. She glanced over her shoulder once, twice, and each time I followed her gaze but saw nothing but shadows crossing under neon. Still, I felt it. That seam in the night I had opened when I read the poster. And as we descended into the station, the echo of our footsteps doubled again. Not once but twice, bouncing off the tiled walls like someone else followed one stair behind. When I looked back, I swore I saw the last edge of white hair vanish into the dark. The city does not sleep. But there are hours when even its noise feels hollow, as if the streets themselves are holding their breath. It was around those hours that another story reached me. Told by a compañera from the restaurant, her voice carrying the same unease that had already begun to nest in my chest. She said she had been walking down Avenida Chapultepec past 2 in the morning, when the bars had emptied and the nightclubs had spat out their last drunks. The avenue can feel enormous at that hour, the sidewalks wide and bare, the trees watching like mute witnesses. She noticed a man standing in the middle of the path, not leaning on a wall, not hiding in a corner, but placed squarely in the center as if the sidewalk belonged to him. He was tall, too tall, thin, his hair spilled white against the night. He was still, too still for someone alive, too solid for someone dead. She thought about crossing to the other side, but before she could, the man raised his hands slowly, palms out. The gesture was almost tender, like a reassurance. "I won't hurt you." That's when he did something that broke every law of how a body should move. He let himself fall backwards, flat against the pavement, and in a single motion twisted onto all fours, but not the way a dog or cat would. He was face up, belly to the sky, his long arms and legs spidered out, carrying him in a grotesque scuttle. She swore his joints bent too easily, too fast, like a contortionist who had forgotten what bones are for. He moved toward the corner in that impossible position, hands and feet pounding against the ground, hair dragging, face staring at the stars. "No old man could move that way," she whispered, "not at that speed." She was Catholic, raised like me in prayers and candle smoke. She said she fumbled for her cross, clutching it against her chest as she watched him vanish around the corner. For a moment she thought about running. For a moment she thought about following, but her legs locked and she stayed frozen until the city noise returned, the sudden buzz of a taxi, the distant shout of a drunk. Only then did her body remember how to move. When she told me, her voice shook in a way I hadn't heard before. This was a woman who could walk home at any hour, who knew every shortcut, who once told me she didn't even fear the dead because the living were worse. And yet now her eyes darted like she expected him to crawl out from under the table where we sat. Her story was the mirror to my ex's, only worse. One saw him leaning low at the corner, a face where no face should be. The other saw him collapse into a grotesque animal, running backwards against nature itself. I thought about those nights when the city hosts performances in the plaza, clowns, fire eaters, men in masks moving in ways designed to unsettle. There's a thin line between spectacle and sacrilege. Maybe this creature, if that's what he was, had crossed that line. Maybe he was a man once, a performer who lived too long in the distortion of his body until the distortion lived without him. But as she spoke, the hairs rose on my arms. It wasn't the crawling itself that haunted me. It was the gesture before, the open palms, the silent promise. "I won't hurt you." In every religion, that is how demons begin. Not with claws bared, but with kindness rehearsed, a lie draped over their hunger. I left the restaurant that night with my map burned, uncertain. Every street corner now seemed like a stage where something waited to crouch, to fall backwards, to scuttle unseen until it wanted to be seen. And worse, I couldn't shake the sound she described. The slap of palms and soles against the pavement, too rapid, too eager, moving like prayer beads rattled by unseen fingers. That sound began to echo in my head as I walked home. A few nights later, one of my friends showed me her phone with a look that told me before she even unlocked the screen. There's more. She had received a picture from another girl, someone who lived in Roma just across Avenida Chapultepec from Juarez. The photo wasn't well taken, just a shot of a wall, its plaster cracked and stained, but taped to it, barely holding on, was a photocopied sheet. The edges were peeling, parts torn away, but the message was still clear. "Have you seen this man? Do not make contact. He is not real." And there he was. That face, the pale oval, the strands of white hair that seemed too heavy for the thin head they belonged to. The eyes printed flat yet somehow looking outward. I felt my stomach twist. The poster in Insurgents had unsettled me, but now there was another, in another neighborhood with the same warning. One could be a prank. Two meant something else, something organized or something spreading. When my ex saw the photo, she whispered, "That's him, I swear." Her voice was sharp, angry even. She wanted to dismiss it, to call it a hipster joke, some pretentious social experiment. She cursed whoever put it up for making her remember the terror. But I watched the way her fingers trembled as she scrolled the image. Anger is often just fear wearing another mask. I stared at that poster longer than I should have. The words gnawed at me again. He is not real. Psychologists talk about the paradox of denial. When someone tells you don't think of a white elephant, the first thing your mind summons is exactly that. To say he is not real is to give him reality. To carve a space in the mind for him to live. Every eye that reads the poster feeds the image, gives it breath, lets it crawl closer. It reminded me of older warnings too, from a Mexico before billboards and photocopiers. In villages after the 1985 earthquake, people painted crude faces on walls with the words "No lo mires, no lo nombres," don't look at him, don't name him. My grandmother told me those were prayers disguised as commands. The dead don't leave easily. Sometimes you have to trick them with silence, with ink. But these posters weren't prayers. They were something colder, urban, anonymous. No church behind them, no priest to bless them. Just paper and glue posted in the damp tunnels and peeling walls of a city too busy to notice until someone like me stopped walking. I couldn't shake the feeling that the city itself was becoming a shrine to him. Each poster like a votive candle, each warning a chant. Mexico City has always thrived on layering. Aztec ruins under colonial churches, churches under skyscrapers. Maybe this was just another layer, an invisible cult, building its idol from fragments of photocopied fear. At night, I dreamed of those eyes, not printed but wet, following me. I dreamed of streets lined with nothing but posters, every wall whispering, "Do not make contact, he is not real." And in the dream, the words did not warn, they invited. I should have gone straight home after the party. That's what I keep telling myself, though I know the city doesn't forgive regrets. It only remembers them. It was a weekday. I'd had 2 beers and the clock had barely struck 11. My shift the next morning was early and all I wanted was my bed. But a girl I'd been talking to all night was leaving at the same time and she was headed toward Reforma. Out of courtesy or maybe loneliness, I offered to walk with her. The air had cooled, carrying the heavy scent of exhaust and jacaranda leaves. A strange mix of metal and sweetness that belongs only to Mexico City at night. We reached a small park wedged at the crossing of Reforma and Insurgents. Its gate stood wide open. Without thinking, we stepped inside. The moment my shoes touched the grass, something inside me recoiled. I had seen this park before, always closed at night. Its benches, I knew, were sometimes occupied by the homeless, sometimes by men who smoked until dawn. The city had locked its gates months ago, and yet that night the gate yawned wide, welcoming us in. We walked through quickly, laughing at our own recklessness. But when we reached the opposite side, the laughter caught in our throats. The gate to Reforma was sealed shut, padlocked. Impossible. We had just seen it open from across the street. We exchanged nervous smiles, the kind you wear to keep panic from showing its teeth. "We'll just go back the way we came," I said. But when we retraced our steps, the first gate had also closed, locked, iron teeth biting into the ground. The girl pressed her hand against the bars, rattling them, then turned to me with eyes wide as if asking me to explain. I couldn't. The park was small, nothing more than a rectangle of grass and benches, yet every exit now sealed us inside. We wandered toward another corner, searching for some escape. The silence was wrong. No dogs barked, no cars honked, though Reforma was only meters away. It felt like we had stepped sideways into a pocket of the city where sound itself refused to enter. That was when I felt it. A sting at the back of my neck, sharp and invasive, like a nail pressing against the base of my skull. Instinct made me turn, and the girl turned at the same exact moment, as if something had commanded us both. On a bench beneath a dying lamp he sat. The same figure from the posters, tall, too tall, hair cascading white, so luminous it seemed to drink the shadows around him. His face was elongated, colorless, with eyes that did not blink. His hands rested on his knees, fingers drumming in quick succession, pinky to thumb, over and over, like he was playing a silent piano. He wasn't looking at us, not yet. His head angled forward, his gaze fixed on Reforma beyond the gate, as though he were waiting for something to arrive. The girl gasped, and before I could move, she had already squeezed through a gap in the bars, scraping her coat, desperate to get out. She dropped to the pavement on the other side, landing hard, but she didn't stop. She ran, leaving me alone inside with him. I stood frozen, heart hammering, every instinct screaming to follow her. But curiosity, horrible, lethal curiosity, held me a second longer. I turned back to the bench. This time his head had lifted. His eyes, impossibly black, were locked on mine. I stumbled backward, then hurled myself against the iron gate. My ankle twisted as I landed on the other side, a shock of pain tearing through me. I limped after the girl, every step heavier, every breath filled with the sense that those dark eyes were still on me. Behind me, the park sat silent, gates closed, holding him inside, or maybe holding me out. And even as I reached Insurgentes, where the girl waved frantically for me to hurry, the taste of iron still clung to my tongue. Because in that moment when he looked at me, I knew something terrible. He hadn't been surprised to see me, he had been waiting. I thought I had escaped that night in the park, that the twisted ankle and the racing pulse were all I had to carry home. But the story didn't end at the gate. The girl I had walked with, she couldn't leave it alone. Hours later, she called my friend, the one who had invited me to the party. I found out the next morning when my friend asked me straight away, "What happened to you two in the park?" I hesitated. I didn't want to say it, didn't want to put words to the thing that had looked me in the eyes. But before I could answer, my friend continued. "She says you both saw him, but she swears it wasn't the same." Her words unsettled me more than the encounter itself. Not the same? I remembered exactly what I saw. The man seated calmly on the bench, long fingers tapping a silent rhythm, eyes locked on the street as if something beyond the gate mattered more than us. He only turned when she escaped, when I stood alone in the dark. That was my memory, clear, fixed, undeniable. But she told another version. She said that when we turned at the same moment, she didn't see him seated. She saw him already on the ground. She saw his long body bent backwards, face pointing at the sky, crawling on hands and feet like an insect flipped the wrong way. She said he scuttled toward us, head twisted, hair dragging in the dirt. His mouth stretched wide, smiling as if every tooth in his skull was too eager to be seen. Two people, one moment, two visions of the same man. How can that be? I asked myself if maybe I had chosen the less terrible memory. Maybe my brain had edited the scene to make it survivable. Psychologists talk about that, how trauma rewrites itself, filling gaps with something you can live with. But then why did her version sound more detailed, more precise, as if she had seen something the world didn't want me to? It made me think of old stories my grandmother used to tell. She believed there are spirits that do not have a single shape. They wear masks woven from our fears. changing face depending on who dares to look. To one they appear as shadow, to another as fire, to another as a beast. But behind all those masks is the same hunger. She called them archetypos, archetypes, born from the collective dread of a people. In Mexico, one of the oldest archetypes is El Charro Negro, the Black Rider. Always tall, always watching, always waiting at crossroads to offer a deal no one should accept. In other places, he is the Hat Man, the Shadow, the Watcher in the Hall. It doesn't matter the name. The form shifts, but the feeling remains. And yet this one was stranger. He was too specific: red jacket, white hair, that grotesque crawl. Too specific to be only a dream, too universal to belong to just one pair of eyes. That night, lying in bed, I kept replaying it. Did I really see him seated? Did my mind spare me from the horror she endured? Or was it worse? That we had truly witnessed two realities at once, layered like film negatives, both true, both present. The more I thought, the less the city felt solid. Walls seemed thinner, shadows longer, every reflection in a window just slightly delayed, as if another world was trying to keep pace but failing. And still the words of the poster returned, circling like a prayer I could not shake. Do not make contact. He is not real. But what if he was both real enough to wait on a bench, unreal enough to crawl on his back like a spider? And what if the next time the two visions would become one? The days that followed blurred into each other, but one detail carved itself into memory. The posters kept appearing. Not just in Roma, not just at Insurgentes, but farther out, multiplying like a contagion. One was taped to the damp tiles of the pedestrian tunnel near the metro. Another glued to a concrete wall near the Diana Fountain on Reforma. Another pasted behind the shopping mall, 222, curling in the exhaust of air vents. Each one bore the same face, the same words, though the ink smeared differently, as if the city itself was trying to redraw him each time. At work, we all pretended nothing was wrong. We laughed, we cursed the long shifts, we fought over tips. But the change was there in the silences between words. No one wanted to walk home alone anymore. Even the bravest of us, the ones who used to vanish into the night without a glance back, now waited for company. We formed improvised rituals, leaving in pairs, crossing ourselves at certain corners, sending photos of new posters in our group chat like people mapping the outbreak of a disease. One evening I ducked into a small church near Cuauhtémoc, not because I was seeking salvation, but because I couldn't bear the weight anymore. The candles flickered, and the plaster saints looked down with painted indifference. I told the priest nothing about white hair or crawling bodies. I only asked him what one should do if they felt something watching. He studied me for a long time, eyes tired from hearing too many confessions. Do not chase it. Do not call its name, he said simply. If it comes near, pray, but do not speak to it. Silence is stronger than curiosity. I wanted to believe him. But curiosity had already hooked me, and I knew silence would not be enough. Walking home, I thought of anthropologists who study urban myths, how they spread like plagues through whispers and scraps of paper. They say fear in a city is collective. It binds strangers together faster than kindness ever could. Maybe that was why I kept thinking of the posters as more than warnings. They were liturgy, a scripture written in photocopy toner, binding us into a congregation none of us wanted to join. Still, every time I saw one, I had to stop myself from looking too long at the eyes. The longer you looked, the more you felt them adjust, like they weren't printed but alive, waiting to widen, to blink. I told myself I was being paranoid. That fear breeds hallucination, that our minds can forge footsteps in empty corridors. But deep down, I knew the truth. Fear is also a compass. It points to something real, something we don't want to name. So now when I leave work at night, I no longer trust my map of safe streets. I trust the rituals we've built. Walk with another, keep your head down, and if you see the poster, do not touch it, do not peel it away. Because if the paper is peeled, maybe what it holds in place will be free to walk fully among us. And if you do meet him under neon, under shadows, under silence, remember the words that echo louder than prayer. Do not make contact. He is not real. My name is Gabriel, and what I am about to tell you has lived with me since childhood. People often think hauntings begin in old houses or graveyards. Mine began in a hallway, the narrow one that led from the stairs to my bedroom. I was 10 years old the first time I saw him. In the dream, my sister was asleep beside me, and I was awake, though I could also see myself lying there. The door was open to the hallway, and I felt it before I saw it, the certainty that someone was standing just beyond the threshold. When the footsteps approached, slow and deliberate, my heart locked inside my ribs. Then he appeared. A tall man, impossibly pale, with a black hat tilted low so that only his eyes showed beneath the brim. His coat, long, heavy, old, seemed to swallow the light. His eyes were the weight of centuries, black and endless, and though I could not see his mouth, I felt him smile at me. He didn't move fast, didn't rush. He simply looked, then continued down the hall as though he had always belonged there. I woke screaming. The door was still open, the hallway empty. But I knew, in that way children know without question, that I had not dreamed. From that night forward, I could not sleep alone without the weight of eyes pressing at my back. Each time I climbed the stairs, I felt him behind me, waiting for me to turn. Years later, it happened again, only worse. I was in university, still sleeping in that same room. My brother often came home late, working outside the city, so it was nothing unusual to hear the door open in the early hours. One night I heard his voice calling my name, soft but urgent. I grabbed my laptop to lend him, opened the door, and found nothing. The house was dark. The hallway was colder than it had ever been. I touched the switch, but even with the light on, the emptiness felt occupied. The next morning, my mother told me my brother hadn't arrived until 8 after sunrise. So who had called me? Who had knocked twice before vanishing? Soon after, another night, I woke to my nephew's voice, only 3 years old then, calling me from the corner of my room. The mattress dipped as though he had climbed onto it, but when I turned, there was no one. At breakfast, I asked my sister if she had sent him up to wake me. She said no. He had never left the table. That was when I knew. It wasn't my brother, it wasn't my nephew, it was him, the man with the hat. He had learned to borrow voices to mimic the sounds of the people I trusted most. My sister admitted something then that chilled me even deeper. She too had seen him in her dreams. The same black coat, the same hat, the same eyes that pressed into your chest until you could hardly breathe. We described him to each other, detail for detail, and realized we had carried the same shadow for years, alone and silent. Later, a friend of mine came to visit. She had begun to study tarot rituals, the path that people whisper is witchcraft. I asked her to read for me, half joking, hoping for nothing more than distraction. When she laid down the cards, her face grew still. Without knowing my story, without ever hearing his description, she said quietly, "There is a man in this house, white-skinned, wearing a hat and a long coat. He waits in the upstairs hallway. He is angry. He cannot leave." I couldn't breathe. How could she know? She told me he had died unjustly, that the land was once his and he remained tied to it by blood. He meant no harm to us, she said. We were not his enemies, but he would not go, not yet. I wanted to believe her, and in a way I did. He never touched us, he never raised a hand. He only lingered, a presence like a heavy cloak across the shoulders, reminding us that the house was not entirely ours. I have thought of rituals, of prayers, of candles lit to guide him toward light. But each time I imagine it, fear claws at me. What if he takes it as an attack? What if silence is the only truce we have? So I live with him still, walking that hallway every day, feeling his shadow press close but never speaking his name aloud. Some nights I hear the soft tap of footsteps where no one walks. Some mornings I wake with the sense that someone has stood at my door all night long. Perhaps one day he will decide to leave, perhaps not. Until then, I live with the weight of his eyes on my back. And I tell you this now, so that if you ever feel the same weight, the same stare from a hallway or a street corner, you will know you are not imagining. There are men who are not real, and yet they wait for us all the same.